Welcome, everyone, for today's September 18th, 2024 session of Wolgar Geomatics College. We're a nonprofit collaboration of individuals donating their time, resources, experience, and knowledge for the betterment of the land surveying profession. Our goal is to participate in open discussions on various topics with guest presenters who lend their expertise and knowledge to the discussion. Gatherings are intended to broaden the knowledge of land surveyors, articling pupils, and other stakeholders in different areas of practice for the betterment of the profession. College is not affiliated with any professional association, other college, university, or business. We are live online from September to March, Wednesdays, 4:30 to 6:30 Mountain Time, whether that be daylight or whatever. We have a weekly mailing list. Sign up. Go to geomaticscollege.com. We want to thank our donors. Some of them are also presenters. That's a funny deal. And just thank those who have the time, energy, and resources to allow us to continue our mission. Disclaimer: all the views conveyed in this presentation are those of the presenter. The professional land surveying has regional quirks and specifications. The material in this presentation is not intended to be specific to any particular jurisdiction, but rather a general discussion of concepts. Today's hot topic: we present rural evidence and hierarchy of evidence with Rob Pinkerton as a P.Surv ALS CLS ... Do you like that?
That's awesome. I love it. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. Wolgar Geomatics College is just great work. I really appreciate this. It really is survey theater, and I mean that in a good way. It's amazing. I try to tune in whenever I can. My name is Rob Pinkerton. Today's presentation is really talking about Alberta and not any of the other provinces. So it is very Alberta specific. I was asked to talk a little bit about rural surveys and the hierarchy of evidence. Tonight, I'm only speaking on behalf of myself, not representing any other organization or company. What I have to share with you are my own opinions, which you may or may not agree with. There's a room full of surveyors here, so I am sure we will have some fun talking about this. I share them freely with you, as so many surveyors shared them with me. I really credit my career and success with so many surveyors being very free with their time and teaching me how to survey over the course of my career. And straight up, one of the best parts of surveying is that surveyors are just never shy to share their opinions with you. Anyway, good fun is had. So, and of course you can see, I actually liked how you did it. I've tried to abbreviate the stuff on the second page of my business card, and people always get offended. As I was saying earlier in before we started recording, yeah, I can really, the various recessions have really, I've taken them to good use, and just studied. And anyway, good fun is had. I also get bored really easily, so that's the other flip side of that. So I'm going to start off here with, I don't actually have a story with this. This is just a cool picture. I took this back when I was an articling student. It's in a rural setting. It's northeast of 103317 West 4, so central-ish Alberta, northwest of Hannah, I believe. It was obviously snowy, so I did get cold once in a while. And this was my background for years and years. And I've stopped using it. It's a little low res. This was taken with a digital camera before we had smartphones. So I finished articling in 2005. So this is probably circa 2004. And I just wanted to share it with people because, anyway, I just like it. I'll start off with the hierarchy of evidence. So hierarchy of evidence: natural boundaries, original monuments or traces thereof, fences or other possessory items that can be reasonably dated back to the time of the original survey, and measurements. Sounds easy, right? That's where, well, honestly, that's why surveying is a profession, and why we get to do what we do. I'm going to go through each of these and then put a little bit of a spin on this, because I think, the hierarchy of evidence dates back to Justice Thomas Cooley, back when he was Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court. And he wrote these down for us. And they've entered into Canadian jurisprudence. Of course, they started as American law, or opinion, and then given to surveyors. And then it's entered into Canadian law, and we use it, right? Or we're supposed to use it when we do reestablishments, when we're missing monuments. So, of course, natural boundaries, that's very, I like to talk about this as the easiest and the hardest of the hierarchy of evidence, because the boundary is the monument. And it was Dr. Ballantyne who taught me that years and years ago. I was lucky enough to be one of his students when he was teaching survey at U of C. That would have been back 2001. So I'm dating myself there. That's a long time ago now. And it's funny because it's also what I would argue is probably the hardest, because where is that boundary? You know, it is the easiest to see. The layperson can see it. The monument is right there in front of everyone. But then we surveyors complicate it, as we like to do. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, because it is complicated. I won't go down that rabbit hole. I know we bring in someone to talk for an entire hour about natural boundaries, but it's at the top of the hierarchy. And I really like to point that out to students. Sorry, one of the things I like most in the world is, one, going on tangents like I'm about to do, and the other, talking about surveys. So it's two of my favorite things going on here. Going down that rabbit hole of what is the hierarchy of evidence and how things flow. Anyway, I also lose my train of thought quite a bit, as I just did. So I'll jump into original monuments or traces thereof. So sounds easy, right? Haha, everything in survey is probably super duper easy and then super duper hard. What are we talking about? We're talking, so like, take for example, this is a rural survey. So let's talk about a northeast corner, iron post, pits and mound. The original monument, well, what is that? Is that the iron post? Is it the pits? I would argue that the iron post is very likely the original monument, and so is the rest. But for example, if you've got that original monument or traces thereof, so if the post is missing and all you've got left is an eye hole, you've got an obliterated monument, not a lost monument. And that's key. So go back to your manual standard practice, and I'm sure this is, I don't see any exams anymore. I haven't been on registration for over a decade. But that concept of obliterated monument versus lost monument. So original monument or traces thereof, you either have that pin, great, everybody's happy. You've got that original 1895 iron post with 4 really good pits, and you can still see a mound. Originally, it would have been triangular in nature, kind of like a pyramid. But of course, weather, frost, everything, they don't look like that anymore. Some would argue they didn't look like that from the Bulletin 38 that we'll talk about much later at the time of the original survey, but that's neither here nor there. So if you're putting something back, I'll say that, because but you still have traces thereof, eye hole, 4 pits, it's an obliterated monument. Now, down here, fences or other possessor items that can be reasonably dated to the time of the original survey. And sorry, I know that's a mouthful, and I always say it like that. And that, I'll be honest, is probably controversial, because I know lots of surveyors and articling students who just say fences. I sometimes sarcastically recommend that they go read The Judicial Function of Surveyors by the Chief Justice of the Michigan Supreme Court, who I just name dropped. And it's a great thing. It's kind of long. It really talks a lot about water boundaries more than anything else. But at the very end, it talks about how surveyors should rely on fences, because the fences were there and the people who lived there used them to and use the monuments to establish their boundaries. How surveyors shouldn't walk into a neighborhood and then just upset the apple cart and let everything go flying and go crazy. It's a great read. I recommend. I actually make all of my articling students read it. Sometimes they like me better than other times, and that's one time I'm sure they don't like me when they do that, because they get all the way through and then it's actually at the very back end. But I think it's worthwhile for everybody to read it. The reason I bring this up is a wooden fence post. So if you've got a green fence post, like brand new, and I've gone out there and I've seen on a plan from 5 years ago where it says accepted fence corner post, and I go out there and I look and it's a brand new fence corner post, and that one kills me. But then you start asking questions, and did they find traces of other fence posts? I really like it when I dig down at a corner, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't accept fences. I think we absolutely have to, but a 1-year-old fence on an 1885 survey, ooh, that's asking for extra digging, and I really mean that. My favorite one that I used where I reestablished based on fences was I dug down and I found the fence, and it was pretty old. I found traces of 2 other fence butts that had rotted off, And so you're going back, a good fence can last 30, 40 years. I'm going darn close back to the time of the original survey. I can't think of anything better than that. That's a perfect world. So then measurements, what am I talking about? Really plan measurements, possibly coordinates, field notes, things like that, and township field notes. And we're going to go through some split line field notes later on, because really knowing how to read those, super duper important working in the prairies in the DLS system. So let's mix it up. What about coordinates? Where do they fit in? Well, it depends. And it's funny, I say that a lot in my life, because people want me to very much pin me down on an opinion. And I go, well, it depends. And I do that a lot, because surveying is really, really complicated. And so in the modern day, I would say if you're doing a regular, like a rural survey in land titles, not crown land, I would say coordinates are down at the bottom with measurements. But if you're, say, for example, on crown land and you're working with a hybrid plan, whoa, wait a second, all of a sudden they're up there near the top with original monuments. So it's kind of an interesting one. And I purposely left a space there and put a question mark, because it depends. Now, they did pass, the provincial government did pass amendments to the Surveys Act to allow for governing coordinates. Not just the hybrid coordinates. Now, the regulations have not been passed yet, so you can't use them yet, but eventually they'll be coming in. And I guess the real question is, where do they fit in? And I would say it's an emerging issue. So call back in a year or two and we'll revisit these. And I'm sure once we get governing coordinates in land titles, and I'm not talking Section 47, I mean, like, these will just be there. And for those of you who hadn't read the amendments, it was Bruce Drake did an overview for ALSA, I'm not sure, a couple of years ago, talking about where they're at. And I know the government is working closely on definitions of coordinates and how we do this, because really, and of course, surveyors ask 100 surveyors, you're going to get 100 opinions. Well, where do these fit in? How should you use them? It's going to be controversial. It's also going to be a ton of fun, because all of a sudden I've lost count of how many satellite constellations we have up there. So it's probably doable. Evidence. So just a kind of a Surveys 101. Evidence can be physical, oral, or documentary. And I really like to talk to surveyors and students about this. And sorry, there's tons of experience on this call. So, you know, I'm not talking down to anyone. I really do mean this as kind of, when they asked me to do this, and I really thank Reed Egger for asking me to come and talk about rural surveys. I really just thought about, okay, what's the last thing we talked about rural surveys with an articling student? And I just put that all together. So it's a little winding and a little fun. Physical, on the ground, original evidence or traces thereof. I'm talking monuments, pits, an eye hole, a rust hole, bearing trees, or parts thereof. You don't see a lot of bearing trees anymore, but they're still out there, and I've found them. Of course, not on the prairies. Although I have seen surveys as far south as Didsbury that did include bearing trees. So they're out there. I didn't find the bearing trees. They were all gone at that point. Oral. Obtaining information from someone with firsthand information about a monument, and then documenting that information by taking an oath from that person. The procedure is in the Land Surveyors Act. Any articling student on the call, I recommend memorizing that. It's super interesting. I've never actually been able to do that, to take an oral affidavit from someone. I'm 45 now, so could still happen. And documentary, this gets really fuzzy and different people define it differently. I like to think of it as plans, field notes. When it comes to natural boundaries, really information about floods from stream gauges, articles, local newspapers, air photos. Air photos are a really good piece of documentary and evidence for what's going on. I really like to go back to old air photos to see what's happened for survey problems. Okay, so, and this is my piece of advice that goes no matter what you're doing a reestablishment. Ask yourself if you are mechanically reestablishing a monument, ask yourself, why is that monument gone? I would go a second step and say, if you have a plan that has mechanically reestablished a post, look closer. Always ask yourself, well, why was it gone in 1978? And especially if it's gone twice. The old Getting It Right seminars used to, one of the things they used to drill into us was go through and look at the history of the posts at a corner. For those of you who survey in Saskatchewan, one of the coolest things they do over there is you can tell which plans, they have it not only by quarter section, but you can see which plan touched which post. So if you're looking at a northeast of 33, blah, 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 west of the 3rd, because you're in Saskatchewan, you can go and sort, okay, these 5 plans found that pin or touched that pin or reference it. I think that's just awesome metadata to show on a plan. And if you're seeing something reestablished twice, well, I'm going to get out my shovel and I'm going to dig a giant hole, because chances are one of them is still there. Especially look at survey dates. Was it all done in winter? I get it. I did a ton of surveying in winter, and you can't scrape for rust holes anywhere near as easily as you can in summer. Later, in my practice, I've really tried to leave really bad reestablishments for later, for summer, and go back. Not always possible if it's a very remote survey. Sometimes the logistics get in advance. Don't work for going back real easily. But if you can go back in summer and go do a monster dig, go do it. And honestly, go do it yourself. It's super fun putting pins in the ground. It's funny. Every once in a while, I'll be with a friend and I'll try and set up over a point. And if I think too hard about it, I screw it up because I just use muscle memory. Anyway, it's been a long time since I've been a field surveyor. So it's, embarrassing if I screw that up. So on this slide, and I should have put it in 48-point font as the very next thing, but I didn't because I did this on Sunday night. And it's like, by look, I mean dig with an exclamation mark. That's in my notes, and I can't emphasize that enough. Your shovel is your most important tool in your truck, not your GPS, not your helper, that's for sure, not your truck. It's your shovel. Go out and dig a hole. It is so easy to go, like, honestly, surveyors, we're good at digging holes, and honestly driving long distances and drinking copious amounts of coffee. Like, that's probably 3 core competencies. Anyway, but go dig a giant hole. It will, the costs of not far outweigh the great fun, and that I don't even know what to call it. Like, when I find a pin that's down 3 feet, it is like, hallelujah. Like, it is just an amazing experience. Anyway, this is not my picture. This is from Practice Review. I saved it from a presentation they did years ago. So I think it's a Scott Westland picture, or at least Scott shared his screen and I stole it. So kudos to him. This is actually an urban setting, but I really like this pin. Go dig a hole. This is a pin that if you just scraped off the top, it would look straight up and down because of where it's gotten hooked. You would be screwing up that boundary by most of a deck. Go dig a hole, go read the pin, go have a look at it. MSP wants a fair bit of information, and there's a reason for rules in the MSP. And, just the number of times I've seen surveys where I know darn well the very tip was exposed and you didn't dig a hole. And of course, there's ways to clean up. You don't have to leave a mess. My very first experience with surveyors, I lived on a corner lot in Edmonton, and my first experience with surveyors was they would dig up my lot corner because it was a pre-1988 subdivision, and they'd leave a mess all the time. So by the time I was 12 years old, I knew surveyors were those bad guys who made me have to go back and replant seeds and clean up the corner lot. And it's funny because looking back on that, and now I'm a surveyor. And anyway, it's funny how things go like that. Anyway, I'll try to stay on topic. But this, if anyone wants to screen capture, I'll wait another 10 seconds, but like, share this widely, like, go dig a hole. Evidence is so important, and evidence assessment. And this is like the poster child for that. Okay. So bulletin 38. Everyone's really quiet, but I talk a lot. So hopefully I haven't lost everyone and they've left. I can't see you guys. Oh, good. I'm going to assume. Bulletin 38. What is it? It's a good question. They sometimes ask that at the oral exam. I'll just put that out there. Well, if you open up Bulletin 38 and read it, and I encourage everyone to do it, there's a really good version of it on the ALSA website. It says the following is a copy of Bulletin 38, Department of the Interior, giving a description of boundary monuments erected on surveys of Dominion lands 1871 to 1917. So in other words, it describes the monuments used in the DLS survey from 1871 to 1917. Straightforward, hey? Well, there was a ton of variation between the monuments, the size of the pits, the orientation, where the post was, everything. And this gives you absolutely key information that can help, I won't say will, but it can help as one of your sources of information to find the monument or restore one from traces of the monument that is left. And actually, sorry, can someone say something just to make sure I'm not just talking?
It's all good. We're good.
All right. Thank you.
Making
Sorry.
sure I don't run
I
off.
can get rolling. I can keep rolling, and it's hard to stop me. So, Bulletin 38. What do you need to know? So, Bulletin 38, I know lots of surveyors, lots of articling students who are very overwhelmed by it. It's super straightforward. It is one of your best friends. So, all you need to know is, are you looking at a township corner, a northeast corner, an east corner, or a witness? I didn't bother with the witness at the bottom because it's kind of a special case. And here, I've just got this, and you probably can't see my mouse very well. I think it shows up when I stop moving it, but it's organized on the left side by dates. So between 1871 and 1880, this is what happened. And the reason they were able to do this is the manual instructions for the Survey of Dominion Lands, which is a mouthful, but I think just rolls off the tongue, explained to surveyors who went from out east. They were almost all Ontario land surveyors, provincial land surveyors at the time. They came out east and they subdivided the land. And these were the instructions in the manual instructions that told them what to do. And at various times, they changed things in the manual. So one thing to be, and I'll get to the changes because that's absolutely key to the proper use of Bulletin 38. And I've seen stuff that does not look like Bulletin 38 before, but there's ways to use this still effectively. So Bulletin 38, this, a lot of people don't know this. I found this out way back when I was an articling student before I ever became a Saskatchewan land surveyor. So this is the original woodcuts, and this is up actually a scan of something I keep up on my wall here to remind me about Bulletin 38. So every time I walk by it here in my house, because I work from my basement, I look at monuments and I smile. And I wish I'd seen every configuration here, not even close. And sure enough, after 100 years of weathering, they don't look like this anymore. But so what happened is, and this is, I've been told this story by a number of people. So if someone here knows the truth, you can pipe up right now and set me straight. But in the winter, during the Great War, it was super duper cold on the prairies. Very little subdivision work was happening. And someone at the Saskatchewan Land Titles Office had a great idea to spend the winter drawing out from the instructions, from the various manuals of instructions for the Survey of Dominion Lands, what they look like. And this was what they did. And there's actually a second page. I don't have a better scan of this. It was at one of those old exam prep seminars when the PDC did them. One of the surveyors, this is circa 2003, came with a ream of these. And I said, this is gold and going on my wall. And of course, I scanned it years later so I'd have a digital. So then at some point after that, it ended up in Ottawa. And Ottawa took the original woodcuts and turned them into Bulletin 38, this right here. And it kudos because it's then gone. All the associations on the prairie know about it. It's an amazing resource.
And Rob?
Yes.
A comment that's been made, and it's a good one. It's when using Bulletin 38, it's just as important to read the manual instructions for the day.
Oh, thank you. That is 100% true. You would not believe how few surveyors have read the manual instructions at the time. We are trying to walk in their footsteps. And so that's the kind of thing I do. I know it's hard. They're all digitally available. NRCan, SGB, they have them on their website. You can go 1st through 9th edition. And if you go, so like if you're doing a survey up against a correction line, go and read it. See what they were actually trying to do, because we are trying to walk in their footsteps. Thank you. That is good life advice. So bulletin 38, let's say you're just using that. There's some pitfalls associated with it. So the one big one, bush versus prairie. Going back here, you can see the corner monuments, bush, corner monuments versus prairie. They were different because sometimes, rocky ground versus totally wooded ground, okay? Where to look? Look in the field notes, and it's not always easy, especially in transition zones. Surveyors, I don't know if anyone's met a stubborn surveyor before, but sometimes they can be a little stubborn. I've seen townships up by Bonnieville that were surveyed in prairie, and it was a total, like, it's just a wall of bush. And then I've seen stuff south of that by a different surveyor who surveyed it as bush, and I've never seen the rhyme nor reason, but look in the field notes. It should say, but it can be really tough. I'll be the first one to admit that it's not a smoking gun. And sometimes you have to look at, okay, what are the monument descriptions? What have they been doing? To then cross-reference back to that table to see what should they have been doing. So the other thing to be really careful about is if you're finding things that don't look right. Like, wait a second, I'm finding pins in the middle of the mound. Why should I? We all know the pin is at the north edge of the mound. Well, is it always?
We got a question here from John.
Go for it. Yeah.
Ron, it might be of interest to you to know that in the earliest DLS surveys in the Yukon, pits and mounds are unknown.
Oh, very fun. I did not know that. I've never actually surveyed north of 60. So that's super cool. Someday I will.
Well, believe me, the survey evidence world on the north of 60 in the Yukon is rather different to any place else, including in British Columbia, where I am now.
So when you say unknown, John, what do you mean by that? Clarify.
Yeah.
Like unknown, like they didn't know to use pits and mounds?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
Like when you say pits and mounds were unknown, what do you mean by that?
They in the original monumentation, they didn't use pits and mounds. They said very typically a wooden post, but nothing else, and no barren trees. Strictly the post, nothing else. The original surveyor who did the first survey of the downtown street grid in Whitehorse worked that way.
Huh. Super cool.
Fantastic. Thanks, John.
Yeah, John. I'm gonna have to call you someday because I've never surveyed up in the Yukon. That is super cool.
Well, I realize this is digression for most of you guys.
That literally, I love going on tangents. So you are welcome to chime in anytime. I mean that. So, okay, pitfalls with Bulletin 38. You're finding stuff that doesn't look right. My advice to you, and I've done this myself, is go look at other monuments erected by that surveyor and see what's happened. So, for example, one thing to really keep in mind, so like, it's not like it is today where you've got typically 2-man crew, sometimes 3-man. And sorry, I mean that very inclusively. Person is anyway, I should say that because we have lots of amazing surveyors who are women. They would go out there and there was a whole party, and I mean that, like, a party chief was a party chief. You had your 2 chainmen, you had your instrument man, you had 2 axemen, you had mounders, you had the cook. I'm sure there was more people here in that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but the key there is the mounders, because you took the dirt from the pits to make a mound. On the prairies, most of the time, and not always, but generally speaking, you didn't put the mound was omitted because in the prairie storms, it could shed back into and fill in the pits. So you would spread the dirt around so it wasn't just one big mound. So on the prairies, a lot of times, no mound, but that's not a rule by any stretch. Just at one of these points in time, they did that. So let's say the mounders had got into their full rum allotment and their mounds or pits were not quite as square or as good, and you're near the end of your survey season and your DLS or your party chief didn't come back and inspect the mounds, it might be a little different. So of course, there's a lot of supposition and a lot of what ifs with it, with what I just said. So, but just take things with a grain of salt, but looking for consistency on other monuments, especially along that line, because generally speaking, and of course, for every survey rule, there is a ton of exceptions. You would survey north-south. So generally speaking, if you keep going in that north-south direction, you'll find additional monuments by that same surveyor. Look for things, and you're really not just looking for the alignment of the mounds and where the mound is with the pin, but also the pin itself. Is it that original pin? Excuse me. So key dates, there's a ton of key dates in Bulletin 38. One date, just because I was bored, because I get bored real easy, I went through Bulletin 38 and I made a 3-page document where I just said, okay, at these dates, the following things changed. What changed between the various manuals? And I encourage people to do that. It's a really cool exercise to see that evolution of the monuments. But if there's one thing that, if you remember one thing today, and like, well, 2 things, hopefully, use your shovel. But the other thing that's actually really, really important, because everybody knows use your shovel, is this key date. So before 1886, in the normal DLS system, the monument was in the center of the mound. Why did they move it? I've heard a number of things about that. The one that really resonates with me, because of course nobody's still around who was there at the time, was that too many landowners knew to go put their fence corner post in the center of the mound, and it was destroying monuments. So move it to the north edge of the mound, then the monument will survive, and the fence corner post will go in the center of the mound. Maybe apocryphal. I've heard a number of different stories about that, but the key is it was supposed to move from the center to the north edge in 1886 and after. Now, did that always happen? No. Surveyors are stubborn. And I'll also say that some surveyors overwintered in the winter of 1886. Like, it was a long way from Ottawa to Calgary. Well, it still is. It's like a 5-hour flight. But back then it was a really long way. I can't remember. I don't believe the CPR made it out here. I should know that. But I believe you did have to back it at that point in time. You actually had to go down into the States and come back because there was no direct route via rail. Is it 1888 that we connected? I can't remember. Sorry. I'm not going to make up dates there. But anyway, so what happened in 1886? Well, buyer beware. I would be I would look very closely at other monuments in the township if you're dealing with 1886 for the relationship between the monument and the mound. Witness monuments, same thing. This is actually just a cut and paste from what I'd done years ago when I was just studying Bulletin 38. There's a real evolution here. Pre-1890, the monument was in the center of the witness mound or trench. And then, of course, for 12 years, the monument was in the inner side. So small changes. I've only found really good witness trench and mound twice. One was in a small coulee west of Grand Prairie. I can't remember what town that is. There's like a dinosaur museum, or not dinosaur, but like a fossil museum just west at Wembley. You go a little south of Wembley. They'd never been touched. There was willow growing out from the mound and the trench. It was just absolutely beautiful. And I don't know if anyone else had been there in 100 years. I wish I had a photo, but it was prior to smartphones. So I won't go into too much detail there. But one thing I did want to go, so that's straight out of Bulletin 38. Well, sorry, this is my wording. Bulletin 38, of course, is the official. Don't take my stuff at face value. Honestly, go read it. It's quite frankly quite riveting, at least, but then I'm strange. This is straight out of the MSP. Be really careful with pre-1890 witness monuments. They were surveyed, the manual, and this is where, and I don't know who wrote, said go back to the manual, super duper important. Going back to the manual and reading, there wasn't a rule for placement of monuments on a surveyed line, so they didn't have to be on that line. So be really careful. Go back to the field notes to see what it said about the witness monument. Absolutely key. After 1890, it had to be like it's on a surveyed line. You're pushing here in Alberta. You're always pushing through from the nearest one up through the witness to your next, whatever it says. So if it's Whit 5 north, find the east quarter to your south, and then up 5 chains, easy peasy. I say that, and then of course it takes a lot to chase those. The other thing, and it's actually not in this presentation, but closing errors. Be very careful with closing errors. And actually, I will try and remember that right here. So I'll show this. So closing error, the surveyor would go up and down, okay? Or just down. It all depends on the survey. Every surveyor is different. But when you closed off on a line, I don't think you can see this, but if you've gone and traversed 6 miles, your closing error was different depending on the time of your survey. And they were supposed to write in the field notes what their closing error was. So a lot of these township plans just show 40, 40, 40 and dashes, and you just assume, okay, it's 180 down the central meridian in a minute a mile each way, and everything is 40 chains. Well, the reality check is we have access to the field notes now, and those blank townships, like the townships that we have are not, it was a multidisciplinary product, much like a well site is today, where multiple stakeholders were using it. This was like the whole point of the DLS survey was to open up land for settlers. That's what they did. And soil types, showing the creeks, showing the roads, showing the trails, all that topographic information, arguably to the Department of the Interior, was probably more important than getting the survey right. So a little bit of history. After summer surveying, a surveyor would either head back east or overwinter in the west with their field notes, and then it would be compiled into township plans, one of which I just showed you. That's a partial township up against the 5th meridian, and that's the Pembina River flowing through it. I like showing this one. I know this one fairly well. I like showing it to articling students because the field notes are really, really clear and a really good learning set of field notes on. So there are, funny this, there are inaccuracies on survey plans and inaccuracies between the field notes and the township plan. In the event that they disagree, the township plan is a compilation of what's going on, and the field notes should govern. Now, field notes, when I first started surveying, I finished university in 2002, and those first few years, field notes were not available. And you had to go and ask for them. They'd take 2 to 3 weeks. They'd fax them to you. It was terrible. Right around the time I got my commission, which is 2005, field notes became available free of charge on Spin. And that's another hallelujah moment. Like, wow, the world has changed. Now, a lot of surveyors were used to not having field notes readily available. I really, really hope that this new generation and guys my age and younger, everybody, and I hope everybody pulls the field notes, like straight up. If I'm doing a reestablishment, I am in the township system, I'm getting the field notes. It's a rule. It's a rule I have for myself. I do it every time. They're not always useful, but wow, when they are useful, they are gold. I straight up, it's free. Why not do it? And it's not free like puppies. This is really free. Put in your file. You can save yourself a ton of heartache, especially when you're working in a blank township. And I don't have an example, but I think everyone's seen one of those where it's just you assume everything is 40 chains and everything is astronomically north-south with a minute a mile deflection.
Rob,
if you're not, go ahead.
Another note to remember that township plans are compiled plans. So the
yes.
angle calculated from the bearings on a plan wasn't always measured.
Absolutely. And especially if you're working inside. So we're going to see an example of that coming up here. And that's a really good point, especially correction surveys. That's one where you may have a straight line and all of a sudden you got different bearings. Hold your horses. Don't just put a kink in your township. They did not necessarily measure that. They just turned off an angle off somewhere else and got a new bearing. And so don't just take that as gospel. That's what's really being said there. And that is so, so true. Sorry, this is awesome. Thank you. I hope I can come back sometime. And I won't take 2 hours, I promise.
And the first passenger train pulled into Calgary in 1889. So you were pretty close.
Wow, 1888. I was actually at Railway Days with my niece and nephew on the weekend, and we saw the steam engine doing the loop, the turning. It was super duper fun. Kids love it. quite frankly, I'm just a big kid, and seeing an old steam train coming through there, that's amazing. But anyway, I don't read all of the signs nearly well. If you're not comfortable with split line field notes, just go download some. Read them front to back. They're super interesting. You've got a diary in them. It tells you what life was like back then. Like our whole job as surveyors when we're doing reestablishment is walking in the footsteps of the original surveyor. Why not read his diary? Some of them are very brief. Some of them are very verbose. They're almost always in cursive handwriting. So here, this is me, a little bit of a soapbox and a rant. In my practice, I'm looking at 2 to 3 sets of field notes every single week. I'm always looking at them. I'm always looking at really weird surveys. And the very first thing I do on an old survey is I grab the field notes and I read the diary. I'm really comfortable in cursive writing. They stopped teaching cursive writing in 2006 here in Alberta. And so we're probably on this call the last generation of people who will be fluent, I don't know what you call that, but able to read cursive writing very easily. And straight up, those old diaries, some of the cursive is just brutal, like really, really hard to read. And like I will routinely share my screen with other people just to try and read it and see what's going on. And we'll transliterate, I'm not sure what the right word is, but try to turn that into something we can do, especially with calls to natural features. Absolutely key. So if you're not comfortable with cursive, no big deal. Practice makes perfect. I'm going to go into here a set of field notes, and just so that everyone's comfortable, I don't know if this will be useful in the exam. Maybe it will be, but it's a great life skill to read a set of field notes. So here, plan of Township 6127 West 4. This is up against the 5th meridian with the Pembina River coming through. So we've got all sorts of natural features. You've got weird stuff. I won't worry about the fractional meridian. If you're ever working next to in a fractional township up against a meridian, go read the manual of instruction, like the 9th edition tells you exactly how they did this, and it will be your friend. It surveyed territory calcs, which is kind of the opposite of unsurveyed territory calcs, but they're similar. But the rules are very different when working adjacent to a meridian. I won't go into them. The manual tells you exactly what they were supposed to do. And man, when you go back and try and do exactly what they did for reestablishments, amazing. Same thing if you're in it. Go ahead.
And one more. And one more comment saying, if you can't read the copy available on Spin, or you think there may be missing page or sketch, email the Director of Surveys office. We have access to the original, and that might actually give away who's saying this, and often have journal entries that aren't published, but maybe the key to figuring out your retracement. And I'm going to add my own little personal note in here too, is if you have a plan where you can't read something, you'll go into LTO and they'll pull that original, and you'll see lines on there that don't show up on Spin because maybe the color didn't digitize or whatever it is. It's night and day. It'll blow your mind.
So thank you, Robin. I won't release your last name with that, but I'm glad to see a friendly face, or such and such there. Totally agree with you. So when they did these field books and the plans, like what you're talking about, Brian, they scanned them in black and white, not grayscale, because it was contracted out late 90s when they did all the plans. And 100%, I was just on the phone with a friend, and he was scratching his head, and he's like, what is going on here? And I said, you know what? I think there is the color red and the color blue on that plan. It's a color plan, and some of those bearings and ties are in color, and because you could just see faint outlines of the water boundary. And he went in. You can go, you make an appointment with land titles, you go down, they'll have the plan ready for you. Back the very first time I ever did that, it was a railway plan, and it was, what was going on was the area to be registered outlined in red. So they outlined in red, but then they used red color, it was on a Mylar. They filled in the inside in beautiful red, not hatching, but like coloring. And when they did that in black and white, it's like a blank railway plan. Like there's no information. I was like, how did this get registered at land titles? I go in, and first off, they handed me the plan and said, okay, no problem, bring it back when you need it. I said, I have lending privileges at land titles? And they're like, yeah, every ALS does. Now, I will say that was 2007. We no longer have lending privileges. I did not screw it up for anybody. I'm just putting that out there. I brought the plan, I scanned it, I brought it back the next day, and I did not destroy it. But because I went in probably in 2018 or 2019, and I asked if I could take it back, and they looked at me like I had two heads and said, "You don't have lending privileges. What are you talking about?" I was like, "Oh, okay." But same thing, you've got a smartphone. It's high resolution. It's the best darn thing. It's a super time waster. And of course, I'm bad with my phone and I have too many notifications on. But you can take high res pictures of everything and zoom in on the details. Take that home with you. It's there forever. Throw it in the file. You're great. And 100% there's stuff on those plans and that is not available. And anyway, I could go on and on and on with that. But field books, so true. There is color in those field books. And yeah, zooming in, I just zoomed into section 27. Pretty fun little section. You've got the Pembina River, beautiful oxbows kind of going in there. You've got all sorts of areas. I won't worry too much about it. I'm focusing in on the east boundary of 27 and on my field notes. So just having a look at that, you probably can't see my cursor at the bottom of this section. I can't remember what that is off the top of my head. And I've been talking for too long. So right below 27. But that northeast corner, I pit mound. Remember that. You go up 40 chains, wooden post, WO, pit mound. Remember, pit stands for 4 pits. Pits is less than 4 pits. So pit is 4, pits is not 4. You go up another 40 chains. Whoa, wait a second. It says 40 chains, but wait a second. Somewhere back 40 chain from 5 chains north, 5 chains from the north, the actual corner, you've got wit, ITM. That's witness post, iron post, sorry, witness, iron post, trench, and mound. We just kind of talked about those. 5 north. It should have been stamped on the pin 5 north. So you're not actually going 40 chains to the witness. You're going 40 chains to the corner. Really, really key. Remember in Alberta, you take this post at the quarter, you push up and past the distance shown on the pin or in the field notes. I have seen situations where the pin is actually marked a different number than was in the field notes. What do you do then? Oh, it depends. It's funny, I say that a lot. In that case, we actually held the marking on the pin because that got us. I think they just said the wrong number in the field notes because it sure everything worked right when we used what was on the pin. So I trusted that. It made sense, but there's a question mark there. Okay, next. And so this is what that previous comment was talking about. I always read the notes. Now, most of this identical, but the very last sentence, all monuments not so designated were erected or restored by J.C. Baker DLS. That's important. So over on the side, I'm going to go back. You look down at the very bottom, compiled from original surveys by William Ogilvie. He was the first commissioner of the Yukon. That's the extent of my knowledge of the Yukon, John. Really cool. He wrote a best-selling book called Early Days on the Yukon. And I mean that. When he wrote that, it was a bestseller in the UK, late 1800s, early 1900s. I recommend it to everybody. Early Days on the Yukon. I don't know where my copy is. It's not in my basement where I am, but it is riveting. And he is a really funny guy. And it talks about those surveys in the Yukon and those very early surveys, especially with the mineral claims, if you're interested. And I'm not kidding. It was a bestseller. Like, it was flying off because, like, this was the new world. And like, that was the edge of the new world just 125 years ago. Okay. So that I hadn't noticed that was William Ogilvie, who had done this in 1882. Moving forward, so we know we're looking for is stuff erected. All monuments not so designated were erected or restored by J.C. Baker DLS. Great. Let's go back. Do any of these have names on them? No. So he did a lot of the internal surveys. Great. So I'm looking for some field notes from J.C. Baker. Well, how do I do that? Well, I go to Spin and I find this. And I've talked to so many people. This is the Ottawa Index. This is your friend. And a lot of people download this and have never read it. No problem. There's also lots of people who know how to read this. I'm not going to assume anyone's touched this. But this is your guide to surveys. So along the north side, you see 9350 J. Baker 1906. Great. That's talking. So imagine this as a square, which is a 6 mile by 6 mile township. The stuff inside the square is the subdivision surveys. The stuff on the east boundary is whoever did the east outline of the survey. This stuff on the north is who touched the north boundary of the township. So if you're working on the section line, you want to be getting the notes from the one below you because it'll be referred to here. You may have lots of stuff going on and you want to look at all of them to see the chronology. So you can see this is a fairly straightforward section. I'm going to go forward. I zoomed in. So this is a zoom in inside the township, 9350. That's your field book number. That's it literally was printed on the front of these field books sometimes and handed to the surveyors. J.S. Baker, 1906. Now, 10966, inspection. Ooh, by, I think that's McWilliam. Different McWilliam than used to be the director here, like the, registrar. 1906, came right along behind him. Crazy. I don't know why. But sometimes I've seen ones where there's an inspection survey and like they did not like anything that this previous surveyor did and changed everything. You go down and you've got field book 14750. I think that's Penner, but I'm not sure. It could be Parson. I'm not sure. Same thing. Some of these cursive writing's really hard. Book C Traverse. Oh, they did traverses in here, likely of lakes and rivers. And then 1926, land classes. I meant it when I said these were used for multidisciplinary processes. I'm going to move across. Here's the front page. Okay. So always open up your field book, read the whole thing. It's super fun. These should be best-selling novels, but they're not. This is the scan from Spin. Field notes of Township 6127 West the 4th. This is straightforward. Sometimes there's lots of these. And one thing that I learned early in my career, when these field books were transferred from Ottawa, so in 1930, mineral resources transfer from the feds to the provinces to put the prairie provinces on the same footing as all the other provinces. The field books at some point were then transferred. But when Ottawa transferred these field books to the provinces, they looked on page 1 of the field book and said, which province does that belong to? And sent it there. The issue with that is correction surveys. Sometimes DLSs would be given a set of instructions to go do a whole bunch of surveys, and they'd start in Manitoba and keep going west. So there are cases where there are field notes still in the provincial archives of Manitoba and Saskatchewan that refer to surveys here. So I'm not saying that happens very often, but I know that's happened. So here, your second page, this is your index. So looking at these, and I'll zoom right in. So here, really important to read. Of course, most of the time, roads are 100 links in width unless otherwise stated, but you'll notice that's blank because different DLS systems, we have the third and then the modified third here in Alberta. And I mean that as the Alberta Township system, not the weird soldier settlement thing that you see out east in Saskatchewan, which is technically the modified third system. When they did a traverse, they said, or a survey, you put which page, it's just an index to pages. So for example, we're looking at the survey of the east boundary of 27, that's page 19. Here, it's zoom in, a little easier for everybody to see, zooming right in there. So you're looking at page 19 because obviously you want to look at that witness monument. Here you are, page 19 and 18. They lie flat. Hopefully I'm teaching someone about split line field notes here. Not everybody knows it, but anyway, I love talking about split line field notes, so I just will. At the top, so it's not page 19 or 18 of the PDF, it's of the field book. And of course, there's 2 pages per scan, generally speaking. Page 18, start at the top. So it tells you where you are. Township 6127, West 4, east boundary of 34. Great, that's what we're talking about on this page. Course 179.59. Great, that's the direction they're going. Now, the thing you got to worry about with split line field notes, you always start at the bottom of the page and read them to the top. So 179.59, which everyone knows is straight down, is actually straight up on this page. There's no north arrow. They didn't do that. You just have to know that they start at the bottom and always go north. The bit in the middle where you've got the distances, so 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, that's the split line. That's not the road allowance. I've had surveyors tell me that's the road allowance. No, this road allowance is very clearly on the the left side of those posts. Okay, you can see they've actually drawn the road allowance in. If you folded these pages together, it would the survey information in the middle would disappear, and you would have kind of sort of your township plan. So you go, you read them. You're starting at the bottom, I pit mound. Great. There is also soil classifications on here. Black loam, 6 inches, sandy subsoil. Interesting. Such is life. It also has, I believe that's what he charged, talking about 80 chains at $550. We'll see. Going along, 10, 20, 30, 40 chains. He gets there. What has he done? Poplar pit mound. So that's a wooden post pit mound, and it's a poplar. I don't know about you, but poplar is a fairly soft wood. I'm not expecting to find that wooden post sticking out of the ground, but I have found really good wooden posts that have turned to almost sawdust when you dig at the north edge of the mound. Out by Drayton Valley, I found the most beautiful wooden post. You scraped off, you went down about 2 inches, and all you found was sawdust, circular sawdust. It was the remnant of an old poplar. So they're there. Don't let people tell you that you're not going to find a wooden post. Of course, you're not going to find it like it says in Bulletin 38 with it sticking up out of the ground. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm sure it does exist somewhere, but generally speaking on the prairie, but you will find something hopefully down below. You don't know if you don't dig, and that's your most important tool. Going north, 50, 60, 65. What did he do? He just gave you a physical tie to where the Pembina River was. You go across, 69. Hey, wait a second. You've got the other bank of the Pembina River. 70, then you've hit the Pembina River again, 79.42. 100 links per chain. They knew the metric system, even though they measured in feet and chains. Then you get to 80. Wait a second, what's going on? WIT IPM 5 North. Kick ass. We just saw that. That's actually off the page. That's up 85 chains. He doesn't say that though, okay? Going to the next page. Always read the top. Always, always, always. So here, 6127 West Fork, east boundary of 34, course 179. I didn't talk about this next line. This is key to remember. Turned off from bearing 270.02 of the north boundary of 35. So picture this. He came off the north boundary of 35 and then turned that bearing. So if you have an angular misclosure or something weird, you can go back and try and retrace his steps from where he came from. And I use he because, to be honest, all of those DLSs were men at the time, but whatever. Same thing here, Township 6127 West Fork, east boundary 27. 27 is right below 35. One thing that was pointed out to me is if you look on the left-hand side of the page, it says section 35, and then it says section 37. And I was like, section 37? That's just wrong. That's supposed to be section 34. I don't know why, if it's a bad scan. It looks like a beautiful scan. So I think that's just a typo, but everybody's not perfect. So going back to the top of page 19, produced from a bearing 179.59 of the east boundary of 34. So he's saying he turned 180 and kept going. So here, this connects, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the bottom of the right-hand page connects to the top of the left-hand page, and you keep reading to the north. So you see 0 at the corner, but there's no corner there. 4, other side of the Pembina River. That could be super useful someday. 5, and it's not additive. It's just like here, it's additive from 0. So 5, WIT, P.I, it's hard to see the I, pit mound 5 north. And of course, north is to the bottom of this page. You go up 10, 20, 30, 40, poplar, pit, mound, kick ass. Keep going. And here, interesting, moss, decayed vegetation. I am not convinced that poplar tree lasted for very long, but there may be traces of it. You never know until you dig. 50, 60, 70. Now you've got different landforms. It's funny, landforms tend to be associated with elevation, especially when you're dealing with tamarack and spruce. You might still be able to find pretty darn close to where that 70 and especially that 76 is, and use that as a call at some point back to a feature. 80, 81 eye pit mound. The other thing, piece of advice, especially if you're mostly working in the cities, when you're looking at a township plan, I'm going to go back here. Note, it says 40, it says 40. It is 41 chains from this pin to this pin. And of course, that's a wooden post. They don't include the road allowances. Rookie move. I've made that mistake myself, straight up. And if you ever find your calc in a quarter section and you're out by 20 meters, you're probably the problem. And by you, I mean me, because I've done that. And I went to my principal and said, this bust, it's huge out. How much? 20 meters. Yeah, go do it again. Great life advice. And to a snot-nosed articling student who didn't know anything at the time, very good life advice to go do it over again and try harder. I appreciate that kind of smack up the side of the head. So here, I've just put this same 2 miles. I want to retrace it here. So from the north, coming south, eye pit mound, kick ass, wooden post, pit mound. We saw that, 179.59. You come down and you hit the Pembina River once. You hit it again. Wit, eye trench mound 5 north. You keep going. Here's your other wooden post. Here, 40 chains. You get down. Remember, extra chain to get to eye pit mound to the northeast below you. See, surveying in the DLS system is super easy. I love that. It's super duper hard, and there's so many variations, and we could do a whole, I'm talking hierarchy of evidence and big picture. We could do a whole, and I know we do that. Sorry, those are some of my favorite ones because I've calced so many wells. I love talking about that. I'm actually taking longer than I thought I would. I won't keep you guys all night. I'm in the home stretch, so if people are thinking of leaving, the best part is yet to come, and I actually promise that. So after pandemic, over the last couple of years, I can't take credit for this one. I am definitely an office surveyor now, have been for coming up 2 decades. This picture is just west of Bragg Creek. This was taken in the fall of 2022 or 2023, the years blur, out with a hike with Alan Main. Alan is one of my favorite surveyors. He's an honorary life member of ALSA, super cool guy. His retirement stuff is going and finding old survey evidence. And I didn't actually ask his permission, so hopefully, Alan, this is cool. But I just think he's a super cool guy. And he invited me a couple times to go look at the evidence with him and take my somewhat out of shape body up a couple hills. And he was very patient with me because he's in his 60s and is in way better shape than I am. So the coolest thing, and I'd never actually experienced this until a couple years ago. I'm out there walking, and there's rocks everywhere. This is out just west of Bragg Creek. This is in the shadow of Prairie Mountain, okay? And we're looking for monuments just to have a find, and it became readily apparent all the rocks disappeared within about 30, 40 feet, and you knew something was different because all the rocks got picked up by the chainman and made the monument. And of course, this is over 100 years old, freeze thaw, and just a super cool example of, this is looking south and the pin is at the north end of the mound, okay? So this is what you're actually looking for out there if you're finding a stone mound. Don't see them on the prairies very often, but in the foothills, absolutely, they're everywhere. Here, this is actually just another brass cap. This is just west of, so on the north side of the highway, west of the Exshaw, you know that giant cement plant as you go into Banff? I call it the Lafarge plant, well, because it's owned by Lafarge. This is just west of that, down in the river valley. So just a really good example of a capped post. But this next one, this is what makes the day. Here's a wooden post, okay? This is from the fall of 2021. Super cool situation. Alan asked me if I'd go out there and go for a hike. This is halfway up a mountain. This is halfway up Grotto Mountain. And by halfway up, I mean probably about 20% because I'm very out of shape and it just felt like halfway up the mountain. Very patient individual. I can't give enough kudos for one of the coolest surveyors I know. He said, Rob, there's some weird evidence. I was out there looking at it and I'd like a second opinion. And of course, I didn't say, and you're ugly too, because that's what doctors do. And I say, I'm there. And sorry, with it muted, I hope some people laughed at that. But anyway, whatever. there's what he found out there was super cool. He found this post and this wooden post. And the crazy thing was the wooden post was just lying out there, but the iron post was in a cairn. And it was very clear, but the surveys were not very clear. There's a chronology, and I won't go into the details because it gets kind of complicated, but the original township survey was definitely a wooden post. And if you look, hopefully you can see, I hope I zoomed in enough, you can still see the XXV associated at IV, possibly. Anyway, it's northeast of 20. Oh yeah, XX for 20 at the very top. And then it gets really, really tough to read. So went out there, it's just loose, and there's an iron post very clearly there in the mound. Now, I don't have a good picture of it, but here I'd like to show, this is a zoom in of this post, same post, one there, one a little close up. You can see XX, so XXIV for 24, IX for 9. So yeah, northeast of 20, 24, 9, west of the 5th meridian. And I'll draw your attention to the crown. So what had happened was when we looked at that pin and we put it up, where it was sticking up probably about a foot out of the stone cairn. The snow, freeze thaw, had rusted out the middle of the iron post, so it maybe had another 10 years left. So what we did is we replaced the iron post, and there's a fairly good chronology here. The original iron post was put in the late 1890s when they were going and surveying the Bow Valley, and then someone used it. They didn't say they replaced it, but they had to have, because the next survey found the iron post from, I believe it's 1906, and this post dates from that 1906 plan, I believe. Sorry, my dates, I might be getting ahead of myself, because the ALSA monument book, I really have to say, I can't say enough good things about it. We do such cool things with practice review. There is a document, anyone who's not seen it, individual pages look like this. 1905, I believe the survey was 1906. You look at the crown on this, it sure looks a lot like that. And the crown on, like, it's funny, the modern monuments in Alberta, I don't think they look much like a crown. They kind of look like something with bursts of ray coming out of this. That looks like a crown. I'm just saying, back in the day, they knew how to do things. We marked it appropriately, put it back in, and kudos to Alan, filed a plan in the corner recordation index. And we actually made drill holes so that if it ever shifted, we could refer back to where we found the original one. Super cool guy, way better surveyor than me. I can't say enough good things about Alan. But back to the monument document, super good resource for dating posts. Go dig them up, look at the crown, take a picture. I mean it. That crown was the icing on the cake, which gave us the connection to say that that survey was right and that they had replaced the wooden post with an iron post. It was all marked correctly. And that isn't a double posting. The reality check is you're halfway up a mountain. They just left the wood post there. We also left the wood post there because I think it's super cool and somebody else, but we told them in the corner recordation index that was what we did. So over practice review, they took pictures of posts, and here, this is monument number 27, crown with cross on top of circle, super cool. This one, it dates, they knew this dated from a survey in 1905. Ours is lining up with this. This is gold. It's 70 pages of survey awesomeness. Can't say enough good things here. I'll finish off with just a very short, I only have one slide after this, and it actually just says questions. So you're on the last slide. Double monumentation, what to do. I know double monumentation happens in both an urban and a rural system, but go look at Section 50 of the Surveys Act. A person who, without the written permission of the director, pulls down, alters, or defaces or removes any monument or survey control mark replaced by a surveyor and carrying out the surveyor's duties under this act is guilty of an offense, liable to a fine of up to $10,000. So don't just go remove a double monumentation without the permission of the director. And my understanding is, and I won't put anyone on the spot who may actually know better than me, is that if other surveys have relied on a post, the DOS wants you to go get a judge's order. But that's talk to them, get that from the horse's mouth, get that from the DOS's mouth or his representative. Don't take my word for it. If you ever deal with a double monumentation, deal with it. Don't just bury it to deal with someone else. And don't create another double monumentation. That's why you use your shovel, why you dig. They are a huge pain. You are causing so much problems for future generations, and go deal with it. If you're having trouble, call the director of practice review. I know Kurt is helpful. He's helped me. He had big shoes to fill, but he's doing a darn good job. Scott was amazing. Whenever I'd have a weird question, I'd call Scott, and he would never judge me. Like, I always worried that, I'm supposed to know all this. No surveyor can ever know everything. And we are a community of surveyors. And honestly, sorry not to go on a rant here, but that's one of the best parts of Rollgar Geomatics College is we're all coming together and passing along some of the knowledge we've all picked up. So that's what I got for you guys. And wow, it's 5:46. I only expected to talk for 40 minutes and I talked for over an hour. So I will stop sharing my screen and open this up to questions. Thank you very much for letting me talk to you about one of my favorite topics. And I appreciate everyone's patience. And thank you, John, for jumping in. And no one surveyor knows everything. And I bow to your wisdom. It's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, we got a raised hand. Feel free to unmute yourself.
He said he wasn't able to unmute.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, sorry. You can type it in, Chad.
Type it in the chat then. Thanks, Chad.
Oh, are you able to elaborate on the east boundary of section 27 survey? You had mentioned the goal is to retrace the footsteps of the township surveyor, but then mentioned the section corner south of the witness is needed to produce the line through the witness to set the corner. Why not establish the line by connecting of the post to the north of the witness? And Darcy, thank you. That's awesome. It's how we do. So witness monuments in Alberta, you always find the one and push through. You never, ever pull. And that's the way we do things. Other jurisdictions do it differently. But in Alberta, you always do that. I'll say that, and I will not confuse any students the week before their rural surveys exam. Always push, never pull a witness, and that's kind of what it is. Hopefully that helps, Chad.
Okay, well, thank you, Rob, for coming out and chatting with us until 10 minutes before supper. And thanks, everyone else, for jumping in.
Well, thank you.
So
awesome.
All right.
Cool. That's all I got. You guys take care.
Guys. And I'll throw a couple of them up tonight, and we'll definitely make sure you have your top 5 there for your studies for this upcoming exam. All right. Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
And you guys have a good night.
Bye.